Hello friends, in this video I am going to explain how pawns move on the chessboard. Before proceeding forward, let me tell you the first move is always done by white. So let's start. Pawns always move in a straight direction toward the enemy side in one step, but if it is their first move, they can either move one step forward or two steps forward. It is also important to note that pawn cannot move in the backward direction. Now, if it is white's first move, so white can move one step forward or two steps forward. So let us, for example, assume that white moves his pawn two steps forward. Also assume that black's move his pawn two steps forward. Now, in this position, you must be thinking that this white pawn can capture black's pawn. But this is not true because pawn moves in the straight direction, but they can only capture in the diagonal direction. For example, this white pawn could capture black's pawn if there is some pawn or piece of black here or here. Then this white pawn can capture that piece or pawn. Now, what will happen in this position? What can we do with these pawns? Now, neither white's pawn can move forward, neither black's pawn can move forward. So, in this position, they both has been trapped. So, we cannot move any one of them. Now, let us say that white move this pawn to this square. Then, you can note that this black pawn can capture this white's pawn. Or if white moves this pawn to here, then also black pawn can capture this white's pawn. So let us say that white move this pawn here, so black can capture white's pawn. Now this pawn of white can move forward. Now you must be wondering what will happen when this white pawn reaches to this last square. Now friends, let us try to understand what happens when a pawn reaches to the final square. Let us assume that our pawn has reached to the 7th rank and now it will get to the final rank. In this case, this pawn will get promoted either to a queen or a rook or a bishop or a knight. It completely depends on you whatever you want to make it. For example, let's say I want to make it queen, so I can make it as a queen. So real power of a pawn lies in the fact if it reaches the final square, then it can become a queen or a rook or more powerful piece which you want to make it. This is the reason why pawns are important in the chess game. Now friends, I am going to explain the most trickiest move for the pawn. This move is called n% rule. For example, consider your pawn at f5. If your opponent moves his pawn two steps forward like this and lands it immediately next to your pawn, then in your next move and that move only you have opportunity to capture this pawn like this. Let us understand once more. For example, let us say black move this pawn two steps forward, and as you can see this has land immediately next to your pawn. Then you can capture this pawn like this. Let me make it more simpler. If your opponent moves his pawn two steps forward and lands it immediately next to you, then in your immediate next move and that move only, you can capture this pawn like this.